I want every time I change my clothes for it to go and make that Transformer sound.
We all had that version, like our own version of it.
Yeah. Yep.
Eric, what's yours?
Anytime I come up to one of those automatic sliding doors, I always say, open.
Hello, Tom.
Hey, what's going on, Dana?
Farting around the house.
As one is wont to do.
Yes. Getting ready to head to North Carolina. Actually, gonna leave shortly after we're done here.
Fantastic. Enjoy your trip. Find cool stuff in Target and Walmart because there's nothing here right now.
There's nothing. We've run out. We've bought it all.
Yeah. It's all sitting in the storage unit.
Although I did manage to get something new this week from a good friend of mine.
What'd you get? Hey! Whoever picked that up.
Yeah, it's cool. And when it rolls, the little tentacles go.
Wow.
They kind of like, it's really creepy. It looks like Krang going.
Great.
Yeah,
I love the blue, like plastic, like the glass, like it has that classic look, which is very cool.
You know what? Again, I give McFarlane a lot of guff, but when he does a good job, does a really good job. Like those look excellent.
Yeah, the Superpowers line they're just fantastic in their simplicity, the way they pay homage to the old ones. Very well done.
So I immediately, because I can't help myself, and my head always goes to this, started seeing those and thought, if you tweak the face a little bit and you make it red and add some blue highlights, we've got a new Battle Beast chariot.
Yeah. Do it.
So again, as is probably very obvious, we're joined once again by my good buddy Eric, who will be joining us.
Hello, Eric.
Part two of Transformers. But before we get into
did either of you get anything new this week?
This might be the swan song for things that I have purchased but haven't had a chance to answer yet, to open yet, because this is
Sunman.
That would be hilarious. How amazing would it be if I'm the only known person online or on the planet who actually had a Sunman delivered to him from Target, pre-ordered, fulfilled, sent from the warehouse to me, specifically because I griped about it so much on this show. No, it's unfortunately not Sunman. It's a Marvel's Goliath. Who was they slapped a sticker over his naughty bits? Why?
Well,
why
conservative times.
Is that because he's bearing it all here? Like I don't why.
It's not his naughty bits they're offended by. It's that horrendously large belt buckle.
I guess so. This is I think this is the last one from that Hulk Buster. I'm sorry, Hydra Stomper.
Hydra Stomper, yeah.
No, I'm sorry, it's not, because I forgot that Talos is in this wave, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not buying him.
He's the Sunman of Marvel Legends.
No, because I wanted Sunman. I specifically wanted him, and I couldn't have him. Talos I can get anytime. I just refuse to pay full price for him.
Understood.
He sucks. So, Eric, have you gotten anything new?
Yeah, I picked up. Get the
it doesn't
again. I'm putting my bat crowd, so it'll come through. There we go.
There we go.
Hey,
it's myself an earthquake.
That's awesome.
Nice.
You know what's funny? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Tom, of course, is the real wrestling fan. I am only vaguely a wrestling fan. I was sort of in the earthquake era, so I'm happy to see him. But for me, it's all about the Motu Origins compatible parts.
Yeah.
And this is a new buck with a fat build, which is going to open up all kinds of doors to cool custom characters. So.
Yeah. We'll see who lets themselves go.
I'm so impressed that Mattel got Vince McMahon to pay for new Motu bucks. Good job. Fine work. Which I'm a little surprised that speaking of Motu in the box, and I opened up all the my newest Ninja Turtle He-Man figures, but I was looking at the mutated He-Man, and I don't understand why they didn't use the Andre the Giant base figure for that. It's huge. It's massive. I didn't realize that I don't own it because that wave appeared for like 5 minutes and then it was just gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
But looking at pictures online, I thought the Andre Buck was going to be kind of like the more husky build, because Andre was never a bodybuilder. He was kind of slimmed out, but he was never ripped. But that Buck they made for him looks like it's pretty ripped. Why didn't they just use that? He would have fit in the card.
I think the Titus armor is molded on, so they would have had to done a new torso.
Oh.
Yeah. Other than that, though, I think you're
Okay.
right. They could have,
That makes sense.
thrown a new torso on there and used the arms and the legs, and yeah, I think that would have been a better choice.
But that's a minor gripe. The rest of them are just fantastic. I'm actively stalking that listing for Slaker because he went up for pre-order, and I missed it somehow. Somehow I missed it. So
For shame, lad.
I'll get them. I need at least 4 of them. So, welcome back to everyone to Two Guys Talking Toys, +1, plus an extra guy, more guy for your value. So let's jump back in on Transformers, because we discussed more, I guess, like our play aspect of Transformers last week,
right,
which was fun. Let's get a little bit more into the, I guess, maybe the origins, which we kind of touched on, but didn't really get too deep into. I think most people that collect kind of know. It started off as a series of different toy lines in Japan. Diaclone. I don't.
Diaclone,
outside?
Diaclone, Microchange was the other big one. And then when we got into like the year 2 and 3 stuff, we also had the Beatros modes, which became the Deluxe Insecticons.
Yes.
There was some stuff from Dorvac, which was the Deluxe Autobots. Macross, of course, for Jetfire. And then like Omega Supreme was not really from an anime or a brand. He was kind of his own thing, but that was still another toy line.
And I don't know, so I'm asking, like, when did it ever get to the point where, like, and when did it happen where Transformers were being manufactured as Transformers, and that was that?
The movie basically is where that transition happened. The combining teams, other than Devastator made it into the Diaclone line, but like Superion and Menasor and Bruticus, they never came out under the Diaclone flagship, but all signs point to them having been originally designed for Diaclone, along probably with Metroplex too. There's a lot of evidence for that as well. But like those movie designs of like Hot Rod and Cyclonus and Scourge, like that really marked the transition period from which it started becoming all
right. I guess that makes sense because they were more uniform in size, and even their aesthetic, the way their shoulders were, like they clearly belonged together, where earlier than that it kind of had that mishmash look, which I love.
Yeah, it seemed like they seem to want to streamline the gimmicks a little bit more. Speaking of gimmicks, I think one of the things that I'm fascinated with for Transformers is that they're kind of, as the line continued, they constantly reinvented themselves, which is what every toy line eventually learned that they needed to do. From 84 to 90, we always had some kind of Transformers line that was coming out, whether it be like the originals, and then you had them just kind of importing stuff, and then the movie hit, and then they started hitting. It was almost like the ultimate hat on a hat. You had first, the transformation was fine. Like, it was just, hey, this is a car that turns into a robot.
Right.
Super cool. Give me that. And then it went from, okay, well, this robot is a tank, a robot, and a jet. This robot is a train, a shuttle, and a robot. This robot turns into 6 things. 6 Shot is awesome. It's amazing. I just watched the collection of Transformer cartoons,
just
commercials.
the engineering for that.
there's a lot of kind of funny fudged stuff where it's like, I'm an armored
squinting.
vehicle. Yeah, I'm an armored vehicle. Well, now I'm an armored vehicle with an extra gun. It's like, that is fine. It's fine. But I like that they realize pretty early on we have to add, you know, transforming just isn't enough anymore. We got to add. You had your headmasters, you had your power masters. You get into pretend. Well, let me not jump too far ahead, because even with everything we talked about last episode, this episode we're probably not going to be able to get much further than Generation 1, which I think is fine because we'll stretch it out. We'll get into the other Transformers lines later.
Like I said, the first gimmick that I remember was the sticker where they didn't know if you
Rub side.
Yes.
Yep.
And I thought that was cool.
In case you weren't sure whether or not Jazz was a good guy.
Right.
Well, and of course that was really because there was still some Diaclone product on the market, and when they hit big, we started seeing knockoffs, and of course there were also the converters and the GoBots. So it was Hasbro saying, okay, if you want to know if it's a Transformer or not, look for this cool sticker that's too expensive to produce for some
For
cheapo
the
company.
schmoes that are imitating. That's right. That's genius. I didn't know that. That's genius.
That's what that was really all about. Yep.
Right. And don't forget the Zybots.
It's too bad. It's too bad that some smaller company didn't catch on and start making their own rub signs, but it was some other weird faction, and someone's like, my guy's a smiley face warrior? What is this? Enjoy your smile cons.
Of course, that's the point at which Transformers connects up to Battle Beasts too, which I'm sure Tom has probably mentioned at some point that over in Japan that was a subline of Transformers.
Right.
And they also had the rub signs for the elements instead of the factions.
I feel like Tom prayed for that.
That is finding out that there was a connection. So we'll jump into Headmasters real quick. I think most people remember towards the end of the Transformers series here, there was that 4-part series that popped up where everyone became a headmaster, and Daniel became the headmaster for RC, and it was all weird. It was very kind of like slapped together. Weren't they just doing that to fulfill just an episode number requirement that they had?
It might have been to hit syndication numbers.
You hear that a lot from that time period.
Yeah, I think Hasbro definitely really wanted to get that year product out in the cartoon in some way, shape, or form, even if it was only could be 4 episodes.
I remember those episodes hitting real fast and real quick, and at the very end hits that real dark tone when Cerebro is like, I want you to deactivate me. Essentially, I want you to just put me down, put me out of my misery.
I'm almost there.
It gets pretty dark.
I already have the code word. Everybody knows I hate tapioca, so the code word is, please get me some tapioca. If I ever say that to you, Tom, that means snuff me out with a pillow.
I'm gonna have to reference this episode and decide whether or not I knock you off with a pillow, or if I transfer your mind into a robotic body that controls a gigantic city bot. One of the two. Yeah,
I'll be up for that.
Yeah, either way, you'd be at peace.
Make sure you reference it too, because I'm into tapioca. So if I ever say that to you, you got to make sure you know which is which.
It's like, wait, which one of them? I don't know. Better safe than sorry.
Eric will just go get tapioca. Meanwhile, I'm creeping up with a pillow. Walk in. Oh, I completely misread the situation.
Right. You're like, he's there with the tapioca, and you're like, last meal? What's
more for you? I guess we're sharing now. So Headmasters hits, and then Transformers is, I don't even really want to say it's over, but new episodes were not being produced for the US, and they picked it up in Japan. They did 2010, and then they ran through our series, but then they started making their own stuff, which was Headmasters. Don't watch the second season if your eyes are prone to causing you to have epileptic fits. The intro to that show, and I think if I'm remembering correctly, Eric, didn't you say it was like kind of tying into a TV-based game? And it kind of ties into the 80s again when certain shows would have flickering things. Like they wanted it to be interactive, and they wanted you to maybe like shoot at the screen, or if you had like a secondary device or like a toy where you could shoot at the bad guys on the screen as they would show up and they would blink. Headmaster said the same thing where they had the intro and then like anytime the Decepticons were on screen, they would flash. And I remember the first time I watched some of the tapes that I traded for, and I was like, why does this change happen? Because the actual animation itself doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that the Decepticons are now flickering.
That was a big thing at that time period. There was a spate
Yeah.
of cartoons that did that.
Captain Power did it over here, and
Mhm.
Yes. Before we knew that was something that could trigger, I think we had Pokemon to blame, I believe, for alerting the public to flashing images causing epileptic fits.
Speaking of Porygon, I think.
Yeah. So Headmasters hits, and you know we got mostly the same characters that were released here, but also released there. And they had in the show Transformers kind of planet hopping, and we got a lot of fun throwback things that they couldn't really do here. There was a planet they wind up on where it's filled with living rock people. Which we're kind of getting now in the current line, but you know, we already had Rock Lords and they weren't able to, you know, you couldn't do that. So they didn't do that. But they
I went through my whole childhood and never owned a Rock Lord. I don't think
really? How's that
really
possible? You never had Nugget, huh?
No.
I feel like everyone has, like they're that toy line where you have one somewhere, even if you don't remember where you got it from.
Right.
Like we've all got that one figure. Like I don't remember
You
buying
know what?
this.
Now that I'm thinking about it, there may have been one. There may have been one rolling around.
I bet you, and it probably isn't one of like the good Rock Lords. It's probably like it's probably Brimstone, Tombstone, or Slimestone, which I now realize why was everyone who was bad last name Stone. You probably have one of those in your collection.
Eric, when like so were you jumped in immediately with the Transformers line like Tom was? Were you immediately a huge fan like he, or when did you buy in?
Yeah, it was. I think, like I think I mentioned on the last show that I did that I remembered sort of that 1984 retail setup.
Right, that's
so
right.
I
You
was,
did. Yep.
I was in pretty quick. I mean, I was sort of
The Red
hand in
Bumblebee.
hand Masters of the Universe and Transformers for quite a while, but Transformers pretty quickly kind of took over the focus for me for a Masters. Didn't help that Masters toy line sort of wound down and tied itself up a lot faster than the Transformers did, but
Yep.
the I think the movie really sort of pushed it over the edge for me for Transformers being the mythology that I was more interested in. And
I was just ready to ask that. Was because originally the Masters of the Universe ethos was pretty simple. You know, it wasn't much beyond the cartoon.
Right.
You know, they had the little comics that came with the figures, but the cartoon was it. But the Transformers had a long history before we even knew what they were.
Right.
So I guess you know, like you said, that was that mythos sort of dragged you in, and at the time, did you go back? Did you immediately know there was storyline that you had to catch up on, or how did that happen?
Well, I mean, in the early days, there wasn't obviously the internet and stuff, so we didn't really know. Like there were always signs, like because they all had cockpits, and you're like,
Yes.
Why is there not a guy that goes in this cockpit? Because this is clearly a cockpit.
That was always an ongoing mystery. Like, why do the Dinobots have a little seat? Why do the Insecticons
That's why I love the
seat?
Storios, because they had those little dudes in there, those little chrome guys.
And you know, the mini-bots clearly had a different vibe than the main Autobot card. So, like, even as a kid, without knowing the business behind it at all, like, there was always a part of me in the back of my mind that was going, there's some other layer to this toy line that I don't understand.
Right. This doesn't make sense. There's got to be a reason why.
And it kept always looking around in the back of my head until the internet finally came around. And then I think like so many of us, we went online and started hitting the early web pages like, oh, that explains it. It all makes sense now.
Yeah.
it was kind of weird getting into like I love the lore from the cartoon. So when I played with the actual toys, what there were because I had a very specific type of play. Everything was wrestling and dinosaurs. But when I did have trained, if I wasn't playing with anyone else and I had my own kind of storylines going, I pulled from the cartoon. And I know that there's the fandom is kind of fascinating to look at just from afar because there's so many different factions. No pun intended, because Transformers is just chock full of them. But you've got people who are loyal to the cartoon lore, which is very different from the comic lore.
Right, yeah.
And it even Hasbro themselves have redone the lore. They've gone back and they've kind of retconned a few things. And then have since then gone back and retconned it again. And that's just for the American stuff. That's not even counting the some of the craziness, the fantastic craziness that goes on in Japan sometimes.
Not to mention Europe, that has its own whole
Yes.
little rabbit hole to go down.
I wasn't aware of that. How is the European rabbit hole different than ours?
So as we got to kind of what was the end of Gen 1 for us, and we bled into the Action Masters and that kind of thing, Japan kept rolling kind of nonstop into past the Master Force stuff, which was like the Power Masters and the Pretenders, and into the Victory line, which was, you know, toys we never got over here.
Oh,
And
Victory's
even
wild.
even a couple of series beyond that. So Japan kept going. We kind of stopped over here. Europe was still doing well enough that they kept going too. So they got weird recolors, a lot of the really late era Japanese stuff. People call it kind of 1.5 because it's not quite G2 yet, though it kind of towards the end bleeds into that, but it's definitely post G1. So there's it's not a huge number of toys and characters, but there's a good cluster that are, you know, generally recolors of Japanese product that have different names and different stories attached to them that didn't get a
That's
lot of
cool.
media, but a couple comics here and there, and, you know, the tech specs and things.
Did those characters ever get created for us, or are they just chased now?
So some of them have sort of made it over into the mainstream. Like, you know, I think of Rotor Storm, who came over.
Yeah.
He's kind of made it over.
In the newer lines, like they've been running, Hasbro has become very dedicated recently to cranking out a lot of the original G1 stuff. Like that's their bread and butter. So you're always going to get that, but they try to kind of pepper in from this catalog of characters that we may never have seen here. I think probably maybe one of the best examples is Leo Kaiser, who was a multi-part combiner in Victory. He's originally he's 6 parts, which made him unique. Technically 7 parts, I want to say, because there was a
14.
That's true. Leo Kaiser is one of the examples when I was talking about having like a hat on a hat. Victory was wild. It was unlike pretty much any other series before it. You had what was called a Brain Master, which was different from the Headmaster in that like the combination method was different. You start off with a tiny robot who combined with a head, became a head attached to a much larger body, and then that larger body connected to a way larger body to become
so like Russian nesting dolls.
Yes.
So
Leo Kaiser was more gimmicky stuff. There was the Power Master gimmick we got here, where it was a smaller robot that attached to a robot body and it gave it more power. The Leo Kaiser was composed of a group called Breast Force, and everyone can giggle and laugh. That's what they were called. But the gimmick was that their chest components detached, and they were animal companions. So sort of like you can almost say they were an evolution of Soundwave, if Soundwave combined with his animals instead of just holding them in his chest. So you had and they were animal themed, so their whole design was kind of like they were wearing like an animal helmet and whatnot. The animal also turned into a gun, so you had your and again we got target masters here as well, which were the robots that turned into a gun that then the character could hold and shoot at people. So they had that going for them, and they combined into a giant robot who was awesome. He was military. They turned
There's
into
a
military
lot
vehicles.
going on.
Yeah. So that he was this character that was beloved in the fandom for people who knew who he was. Like anyone that knew he existed was like, oh, when are we getting Leo Kaiser here? When is Hasbro going to make Leo Kaiser? And then Hasbro did a series called Combiner Wars, where they had worked out a gimmick where they were redoing. They were going back and they were tackling all the gestalts from Gen 1, and one of their box sets was Leo Kaiser. And when people found the name had gotten leaked, everyone was like, "Hooray!" And then they were released, but they were repaints, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's a 6-person combiner, you can't do that unless you have completely original engineering for that torso 2-person combining thing. Instead, earlier in the line, they had taken Skylinks, we have to talk about Skylinks, who is a giant winged dragon creature who rides around on top of a 4-legged companion, and they merge and become this super cool looking dragon dino critter. Because that wasn't he was also from a different toy line originally.
Yeah, he was. I believe I'd have to double check, but I believe he's actually from the same designers and manufacturers that did Omega Supreme Toy Box.
Okay,
was the name of the company originally.
That makes sense. One of my preferred Transformers from the original series, but Hasbro had redone him in the Combiner Wars line, and they decided Skylink should be repainted as Leozak, which is just a weird choice.
I mean, he was Deathsaurus actually, which was even weirder.
Oh, is that who they turned him into?
Yep.
Also a little weird. Makes a little bit more sense because
a tiny bit, but yeah, it's so crazy.
Because the main villain, for those who don't know, the main villain in Victory is a character named Desaurus, who is again he's everything combined. He's got breast force animals that he works with. He is a gigantic robot. He turns into he's classified as a giant kaiju. The joke is that he's a giant space chicken because he does have kind of a beak style face. He's got the giant wings. He is super cool.
Space chickens are terrifying.
I know. I mean, and they're evolved from dinosaurs anyway, so they're terrifying.
Space dinosaurs.
An emu will mess you up if you're not careful. Don't mess with space emus. But if I completely forgot that was who they named Skylinks after. But he's colored like Leozak, which also is kind of weird.
It's kind of halfway between Deathsaurus and Leozak.
Yeah.
It's not a clean Deathsaurus by any means, especially since he doesn't have a robot mode for starters.
Yeah.
And yeah, even the color scheme has just enough Leozak flavor to make Leo Kaiser look kind of rightish in combined mode, but it's got enough Deathsaurus flavor to kind of passes him, at least in dragon mode.
Yeah, so it was a cool nod. It was something different that was interesting. But for anyone that may have been a purist who just wanted the original, like a throwback to that, it was a little bit wanting. They've yet to do, I guess, an official version of this. But in the meantime, they've given us Victory Saber. They've given us Desaurus and the HasLab. So I'm pretty happy with those.
Yeah, we're starting to check off the boxes one by one.
So we've got a few minutes left. I want to hear from both of you, there is a huge historic evolution of the mythos and the characters and the way they're designed and the engineering. So which one of the lines do you prefer and has been your favorite? The biggest part of your collection is what, Eric?
Well, biggest part is one thing. Favorite is probably
well,
another.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, the biggest part probably at this point has been the ongoing modern generations Classics universe sort of amalgam line that Hasbro's been chugging through, no pun intended for the Transformer fans out there, for the last several years. If I had to pick a favorite line, though, I'm going to go a little against the grade, and I'm going to say Beast Wars second. And we haven't even gotten to Beast Wars yet.
Yeah,
But
well,
this was the Japanese spin-off line from Beast Wars, and it's my favorite because there's a really cool anime that goes along with it that's got a great storyline, but it has a mix of characters that are kind of the Beast Wars style characters. There's also Gen 1 style characters in it. It kind of brings the best of all the eras that existed at that time anyway, together into kind of one coherent storyline that really gives the universe that's a flavor of real completeness that I love.
Cool. You're right, Tom. We should do an episode like Beast Wars, and then like
Yeah.
the Transformers. We should
Yeah.
break it down by series. Which
Yeah,
one is your favorite, Tom?
that's a tough call. I I really like Eric's pick because the common once we got through Generation 1, and then we did Beast Wars, and I liked it. Unfortunately kind of broke the fandom into even more factions, where you have kids that came up with Beast Wars, and you had people who were really clinging hard to G1, and there was all this friction and back and forth, and it was kind of unnecessary. So I really loved that shows like Beast Wars 2 and Car Robots combined both. I mean, we already had animal Transformers in Gen 1, but it was kind of cool to see a combination of Beast Wars style characters interacting with very Gen 1-ish characters, and you have a coherent story, and it's not just a random mishmash, and it actually made sense.
Right.
But I think for me, for my favorite line to collect is probably the most recent series that have been coming out over the last, I want to say maybe like over the past 10 years or so. We haven't touched the Transformers movies, but I will always, despite my opinion of the Michael Bay films, which is not high, after the third movie, I understood what they were. And the offerings that we were getting from Hasbro, we would not have been getting had those movies not been raking in billions of dollars. Like, the franchise was just a juggernaut of money, and wave after wave after wave of money. And I am perfectly willing to exist with a series that I'm not that fond of if it gives me more of what I actually want. So the most recent series that have been coming out, starting with, I want to say, it wasn't Power of the Primes. Was it Titan Wars? I forgot. They started up a line where the emphasis was, we're doing old school characters. We're upgrading them. Like, these are specifically old schools. It's different from classics, which took characters and kind of upgraded them. These are the old school characters, new articulation, better engineering. And from that point onward, I've loved collecting all of those. And I've hit the point now where I don't really customize anymore, because they've nailed most characters that I've wanted to get my hands on. So we're at the end. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Two Guys Talking Toys. I am Tom. This has been Dana. This has been Eric. If you enjoy what you've heard, get a hold of us on Twitter. Our handle is Two Guys Talking Toys. The number 2, no G after the talking. Same thing for Gmail. Take care, everybody.